Most people think cooking a great curry is all about the recipe, but honestly, it's the spice technique that can make it or break it. In today's video, I'll be cooking a simple curry, and along the way, I'll show you the exact techniques that I use to make spices taste richer, more aromatic, and perfectly blended throughout the dish. And if you're new here, my name is George. I post a new cooking video every Wednesday and Sunday, so be sure to stick around and let's get cooking. The first step is to make your spice mix, and in my opinion, using whole spices, toasting and grinding them makes so much difference to the overall flavor of the curry. You get new flavors from toasting the spices, such as smoky and nutty aromas, plus the end flavor is a more rounded result, less sort of harsh and pungent. Before we start grinding, I always put down a tea towel. This gives you more control over the pestle and mortar, it's less noisy, and you're less likely to damage something with this heavy bit of granite, essentially. I'm using about 10 cardamom pods, as they are quite small. And the best way to get the seeds out is to give them a quick bash in a pestle and mortar. Give it a good old bash and grind, and that's going to get the seeds out nice and easily. You can then just go in there and pick out the shells, takes no time at all, leaving you with just these beautiful aromatic seeds. So I'm just going to get a small pan over a medium heat. So when you're toasting spices, you want to start with the more sturdy ones, such as black peppercorns. These are less likely to burn, whereas if you added cumin seeds at the start, they toast really quickly. Next, another quite sturdy spice, coriander seeds. I'm going to go for 2 teaspoons. Cardamom's quite robust, so we'll add that in now as well. Just give it a little shake every now and again to make sure they're being evenly toasted. Next, I've got some lovely floral fennel seeds. And then lastly, these sweet and aromatic cumin seeds. We'll let these toast until beautifully aromatic and slightly toasted. And then once they're ready, make sure you get them out the pan straight away, or else they'll continue cooking and potentially burn. So there's 2 basic techniques. There's pounding or bashing, which is exactly as it sounds. I always like to put my hand over the mortar to stop the spices from escaping. And this is a great way to start off. You're just sort of releasing the spices from their shells almost. The toasty aromatic smells coming from here are just absolutely beautiful. And then the next technique is muddling, and that's where you're applying a sort of even pressure and moving the pestle around the mortar. Now you could use a spice grinder, and it is certainly a little bit quicker, but I find it really therapeutic just to do it with the pestle and mortar. I also find that a spice grinder more just sort of cuts up the spices, whereas with a pestle and mortar, you're grinding them down and you're releasing all their aromatic oils. So that has only taken literally about 2 minutes of bashing and muddling, and it is perfectly ground. So I didn't think I had any cloves, but it turns out I do, so I'm going to quickly toast and grind these. Just going to do about 5 or 6 of them. I'm going to add a few pre-ground spices as well, starting with some ground turmeric and some ginger, paprika. The problem with using dried spices is less about how flavorful they are and more about how short their shelf life is. Dried spices tend to lose their pungency very quickly from exposure to air, light, moisture, and heat. Whereas whole spices are much more robust, they have less surface area, so they retain their essential oils and flavor for longer. And then all you need to do is give them a quick toast and grind to release their beautiful flavors and aromas. Or you can leave them whole like we will in the Tadka later on. Also going to zest in some fresh nutmeg. I wouldn't like to try grinding this in a pestle and mortar. And I'll just quickly mix those through. This spice mix, we're actually going to use it twice in the recipe. First to marinate some tofu, and then we'll use it in the base of the curry. The turmeric and paprika are turning it a lovely golden red color. So that is our spice mix ready to go. It smells absolutely incredible. For the marinade, we'll start with some unsweetened yogurt, about 200 grams. Then half of that beautiful spice mix we just created. Some lemon juice. I'm running a bit low on fresh garlic, so I'm going to use some granulated garlic and save the fresh for the curry base. Then I'm going to zest in some fresh ginger. I'm going to keep the skin on, that's absolutely fine. If you don't have a good zester, then you can just finely chop the ginger. And then just a nice pinch of salt, maybe 2 nice pinches, and a good grate of black pepper. Although we have got black pepper in the spice mix, so I'm not going to worry too much about that actually. And then just a quick whisk to get it all combined. So I've got some leftover tofu from a previous video. I've actually got firm and extra firm here, so that's going to add a nice little sort of variety in texture. and I'm just going to simply tear it into the marinade. I love tearing up tofu because it gives you a really nice sort of rustic edge for the sauce to cling onto, or the marinade even. And then we've got firm tofu as well, a little bit more delicate. And then I've got half a cauliflower, which has just been hanging out in the fridge, asking to be used. So I'm just going to cut it down into small florets. And I want this cauliflower to cook at the same sort of rate as the tofu. So I'm going to make it fairly small. Once it's been marinated, we're going to be grilling it and adding it back into the curry. And then just add your cauliflower into the marinade with the tofu. And then we'll just gently fold the marinade around the tofu and the cauliflower, being gentle so that we don't break up the tofu too much, especially the firm one. The extra firm one should be okay. And then ideally marinate overnight, or just for an hour is better than nothing. Got this over a medium heat, and I'm adding about 1.5 tablespoons of oil. Then go in with your onion, just roughly chopped. You could also slice it if you want to, and I want to keep it fairly rustic so that it doesn't burn and it has time to really caramelize in the pan. If I was going to add some whole spices like mustard seeds, cumin seeds, that sort of thing, I would have added them into the oil for a minute or two before adding in the onion. But we'll add in some spices at the end in the Tadka for more of a sort of fresh and pungent kick of aromatic spice. The onion's starting to get some nice color on it, so we're going to go in with the ginger, minced garlic. I'm going to remove the seeds, but if you like your heat, then you can of course leave them in. And some finely chopped chili. And we'll let them cook for about a couple of minutes. As soon as you add that chili, garlic and ginger, the smell that comes from the pan is just so beautiful. Before adding the second half of the spice mix, I'm just going to add a drizzle more of oil. This is going to cool down the oil and ensure that the spice mix doesn't burn. The next potential mistake with spices is to leave it too late in the cooking process and then just dump them in at the end. This can lead to a really harsh and bitter flavor from them. I always bloom my spices in oil as most are fat soluble, and this transfers the aromatic flavor throughout the curry sauce. If you don't cook with oil, that's absolutely fine, but it just makes the toasting of the spices earlier on even more important. I also find that adding too many dried spices towards the end of the cooking process can lead to a sort of grainy texture rather than a nice smooth curry sauce. The kitchen should be smelling absolutely incredible now. And then I'm adding in my chopped tomatoes. If I was going to add in tomato puree, that would go in first and I'd let it caramelize a bit in the pan before adding in the chopped tomatoes. Also just washed out the can with about 100 ml of water. And then we'll bring this to a simmer and we're going to let it cook down for about 10 to 15 minutes. This is going to be the base of the curry before we add in the coconut milk and the grilled tofu and cauliflower. So I've just preheated the air fryer and I've added a little bit of oil, and now I'm going to add the tofu and the cauliflower, which we're going to grill until beautifully caramelized and maybe even slightly charred in a few places, which will give it an amazing flavor. So this has had 15 minutes in the air fryer, and as you can see, it's got some incredible caramelization on it, and it's going to add so much flavor to this curry. So the curry base is now beautifully thick and almost jammy. It looks incredible. The tomatoes are really nice and caramelized, so they're going to add a lovely sweetness to this curry. So we can now add in our coconut milk. You're welcome to use cashew cream instead if you would prefer. We'll let this simmer away for about 15 minutes to get lovely and thick and for all the flavors to come together, and then we'll add in the grilled tofu and cauliflower. I'm also going to add a tablespoon of ground almonds. Just gives it a really lovely nutty Moorish flavor. This curry is kind of a mix of different recipes and is more just to show you guys how I like to use spices. In general, the earlier you add the spices to the dish, the better the overall flavor is going to be, which explains why curry tastes so much better the next day. The spices have had a whole 24 hours to come together and create one harmonious, rich curry sauce. The stronger spices will become less sharp or harsh and more integrated into the dish, whereas the subtle spices will have more time to release their full flavor profile. While the curry sauce blips away, we're going to make a little bit of rice. I'm going to add a touch of oil to a pan, and I'm going to use even more spices in this rice, starting with a few cardamom pods and a touch of turmeric to give it a lovely golden color. Also going to add just a few cumin seeds, and they're going to bloom in the oil. Then I'll just add in my rinsed white rice, and then just give the rice a little toast and get it sort of coated in the turmeric and spices. Also add a little pinch of salt, and then I'm just going to add in cold water. For white rice, I do a ratio of 1 part rice to 1.5 parts of water, and we'll just bring that to a simmer, pop a lid on it, and then we'll cook it for around probably 12 minutes-ish. So that's simmering now, and I'm just going to pop the lid on. So that's had about 10 minutes. The water is all absorbed, but I'm going to leave it to steam for another 5-10 minutes to fully cook through and be lovely and fluffy. So we'll add in the grilled tofu and cauliflower now. Make sure you get all of that marinade in there as well. So this doesn't really need any more cooking now. We're just going to give it a few minutes to simmer so that all the flavors sort of come together. We can adjust the seasoning now. I always add a good squeeze of lemon juice or lime juice to really bring out the flavors and add a bit of freshness. Now there are a few times where you might add spices towards the end of the cooking process to preserve their delicate, fresh and aromatic flavors. Garam masala, for example, is commonly added towards the end of the cooking process because of its delicate and aromatic spices like nutmeg, clove and cinnamon. The vibrancy of these spices can be lost when cooked for long periods of time, hence adding it towards the end. For the Tadka, I've got a pan over a medium heat and I'm going to add about 1.5 tablespoons of oil. I'd usually use a smaller pan, but this is the only pan I've got currently. I treat the Tadka almost like a garnish. It adds a bonus spicy and aromatic hit. These spices are going to be fresh and pungent, whereas the spices we added at the beginning of the cooking process will have mellowed out to create a more balanced curry flavor. And just like with toasting the spices, you want to start with your more robust spices. We're going in with coriander seeds, fennel seeds, and some mustard seeds. Give that a little shake, and we're going to wait for the mustard seeds to start to pop a little bit, and then we'll add in our next spice. The mustard seeds are popping now. I'm going to add some cumin seeds. The cumin seeds toast really quickly, so we'll only give them about maybe 1 minute. Finally, I'm adding in some curry leaves. I'll turn the heat off now. The residual heat will cook the curry leaves, and then immediately you want to spoon that over the curry to ensure it doesn't burn in the pan. And then for me, I always love a good handful of fresh coriander to finish it off. And that is going to be an absolutely delicious curry. The rice is nicely steamed, so I'm just going to remove the cardamom pods. They'll float to the top, so it's really easy. And then you can just fluff up your rice with a fork. And there you've got some lovely fluffy rice, lightly spiced with turmeric, cumin and cardamom. Incredible. I can't stop eating. This dish has so many layers of flavor. You've got the base curry spices just sort of humming in the background with the nutmeg, the cardamom, and the clove, really lovely. Then you get the more punchier spices in the Tadka, like the mustard seeds, the fennel and the coriander, really nice citrusy notes. And yeah, lovely, lightly fragrant rice, really delicious. So when you next make a curry, be sure to use these spice techniques, the toasting, the grinding, using whole spices, blooming them in oil, and also, if you want, doing a Tadka at the end. Thank you so much for watching. For some more Indian cooking inspiration, check out this Indian meal prep video.